Shalom. I'd like to talk today about the concept of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition. This is a very vast and important principle in our understanding of the process of transmission of the knowledge and the authority of the Torah. And it's also an important insight into the whole concept of the Jewish perspective of Bible scholarship and understanding of the significance of our connection to the Torah as a living plan, as the living manifestation of Hashem's will in the world. You see, when we really think about the Tanakh and we examine it, we see, we want to be honest, that it seems to be very skeletal. It seems to be almost like the notes that were taken at a lecture, like some sort of shorthand. And there seem to be things that are missing. And there are many famous examples of this. You know, when you look at the concept of the tabernacle, which later became the Holy Temple, and all the details that are presented in the Torah portions in the book of Exodus, there are still so many details that are missing as to how these things are to be done. When you look at some very basic ideas in Judaism, even the concept of everyone knows you're supposed to fast on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement. But it doesn't actually say that in the verse. It says the words are, you shall afflict yourselves. How do we know that that means that we are required to fast? We take a very basic example like the concept of the Jewish scribal arts, tefillin, the phylacteries that we wear in our morning prayers, the mezuzot that we write on the doors, even the Torah scroll itself. These things are written in a very exact manner. And when we find in ancient archaeological digs, we find parchments from many thousands of years ago, we see that they were written in the exact same manner. But it doesn't actually say anywhere in the Torah how each letter is to be formed. And in addition to the shape of the letters, there are literally just piles and piles of all sorts of details, of nuances, of requirements as to how these things have to be done. But yet all it says in Deuteronomy 6 is, you shall put them for a sign on your hands and for frontlets between your eyes, and write them upon the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So how do we know this information? Even when it comes to something as basic as the way we prepare meat, the way that we have to do shchita, the kosher slaughtering of animals, God tells Moses, according to the way that I show you. And so many times regarding the tabernacle and other ideas, God says, according to that which I showed you in the mountain. So this is all alluding to a very basic idea in the Torah, and that is that when God gave the Torah to Israel, he did so in two parts, but simultaneously. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was on Mount Sinai, the Bible tells us, for 40 days and 40 nights. So what was he doing all that time that he was on Mount Sinai? God was actually teaching Moses every detail of how every commandment is to be observed under every condition, in every age and in every clime, how the Torah is to be fulfilled. And also, he gave over to him an incredible system of interpretation of how to understand the Torah in a changing world. Now, why did he do it this way? This was the ultimate wisdom of God that decreed that in order to keep the Torah as a living process, connected in every generation like a chain that's unbroken to the Sinai revelation, he did so in such a way that this vast body of information is accompanying the written Torah, which is fluid and a living process. And I really believe that it's because of the oral Torah that the Jewish people are alive today. This is what's kept us alive as a people. This is what's kept the Torah alive. And one of the beautiful things about the process of Torah study is that we are encouraged to ask questions. Indeed, the sages say that even a question that was asked, that will be asked in the future by a little child of his teacher in school, those questions were already said at Mount Sinai. They were already foreshadowed, foreseen. What does that really mean? The idea is that this is an atmosphere that encourages questioning when we don't understand something. There are so many disciplines in the world today and so many religions. There are so many people that are told, well, we don't ask that. Well, don't, no, that's not something. Well, if you believe in God, you don't ask that. And that's not a Jewish idea. The Torah teaches us that the greater faith a person has, the more he has the right to ask. I want to see, I want to understand what God is doing here. I want to understand how he is interacting with the universe. And so that's one very basic idea that we understand from this process. But also it's important to understand, many times when we teach, many times when we study together, we reference all sorts of commentaries and traditions and amazing ideas of what's going on kind of behind the scenes in certain verses in the Torah. And some people will come and say, oh, that's this rabbinical Judaism thing, right? That's this man-made thing. And nothing could be further than the truth. And that phrase is so ironic, rabbinical Judaism, because what this is from the mouth of the Almighty. But the idea is that it was given over in such a way that we would be included in it in every generation. The process of the transmission of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, goes on today. And so, far from this being a manifestation of some sort of man-made religion, for us, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, has the same authority as the written Torah because it was given by the Almighty at the same time. And today you can buy most of the works that are considered to be the oral tradition. They're readily available in written form, but they're still referred to as the oral tradition because its very nature was intended to be something that's given over in every generation from teacher to student. But yet it's still called the oral tradition. And at one point in history, when the Romans were systematically executing all of the rabbis who possessed this knowledge in an effort to stamp out the Jewish people by destroying the Torah, indeed this was the whole goal, that campaign brought about a reaction from our sages of blessed memory that they made a decree that even though the nature of the oral tradition is that it's to be given over from mouth to ear, as it were, from teacher to student, because there was a fear that those possessing the knowledge would all be killed, then it was permitted to write it down. And we have the famous story, for example, of the great Rabbi Akiva, who was the embodiment of the oral tradition. Indeed, our sages teach us that what Moshe is to the written Torah, like the guardian of the written Torah and the giver of the written Torah, so too Rabbi Akiva is that for the oral Torah, and indeed there's a spiritual relationship between the two of them. So Rabbi Akiva was taken to this Colosseum, and the very flesh from his body was combed off, this terrible torture with these iron combs, for the crime of teaching Torah in public. And it's important to know that all of these great men, they were all men of tremendous spiritual stature. They were all being killed for their dedication to the Torah. And something that many people are not aware of, Josephus writes historically. He writes, so many Jews were crucified in the land of Judea that there weren't any trees left standing. We're talking about tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of Jews, not just one. So it's very, very important to understand that because of this tremendous onslaught against the Torah, a decree was made for the oral Torah to be committed to writing. But to this very day, these two streams of the reality and the vibrancy of the one true living God come to us in accompaniment. They have the same authority. They come from the same pure and unadulterated source. And the written Torah is amplified and explained and crystallized through the revelation and the ongoing conscious exploration of the living Torah. And these are the words of the living God.